the presentation from Nairobi University on the literature review.
And I communicated with my DG.
Yes.
Just in case he will have some little time, he may pop in.
Yes.
And since our star is Dr. Molo, she may take an hour because she and her group must have taken effort to do all that they have to present to us. And then after that, we may discuss. Is that okay?
Very much in order, very much in order.
Okay, then I take it back to you then.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Molo, you're there?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
All right.
Morning.
Are you? Morning. And good morning, everyone else. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So I think in the interest of time, and thank you first for sharing beforehand your presentation. It will make the discussion much easier. So maybe we how long do you anticipate you would need?
We had thought maybe 30 minutes, and then we leave some time for discussion, because the main aim is for us to get as much input as possible so that we move forward with a shared understanding.
Yes. Then we can aim for 30 minutes and some Q&A. And as Dr. Otomo, would you like that your DG, when he comes in, we recognize him and allow him to say something, or how would you like us to plan that?
Okay, in civil service,
Yes.
Once decision makers come in, we stop what we are doing.
Yes.
We welcome them. We do some introductions, and then we
Yes.
let them say their piece. And if they exit, we continue.
Okay.
That is if he will show up. If he doesn't, we still utilize the time to do our own discussions. But he had requested I do some short report. Short report is usually a 1 or 2 pager.
Yes.
And our current DG, he likes to publicize things on our website. So
Yes.
he may, if he goes to that extent, I may require your pictures, because people who are CEOs also play politics, so they. So I don't understand this fixation with pictures. So I usually give him a picture of myself in the beach, but he will have a picture with a suit.
Okay, noted, no problem. So will you please alert us when he's here, then we can then stop. But I think in the interest of time, and if it's in order, we will allow Dr. Molo to start our presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Should I share my screen from my side?
Please, yes.
If you can, please do.
And I'm recording just for members who may not have known. We usually record our meetings. Thank you.
Okay. So can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, I can.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Great. Okay, great. Yes, so our presentation today is on the first deliverable of the work plan that we agreed to assist with, and it was on benchmarking. So the proposed activities in benchmarking were to conduct desktop studies referring to reports, policy briefs, energy acts, all on solar PV technology. And then the focus was to be given to best practices in other countries, including regulatory frameworks and programs by respective governments and other stakeholders. We were also to look at solar PV market segments, key barriers in adoption at the local level, existing regulatory frameworks at the local level promoting solar PV adoption. So what we started off with already was to have a methodology where we did a systematic literature review using Scopus and EBSCO host. So that allowed us to look at all the literature that is relevant to this area that is of academic quality. And then from there, we used Google Scholar and Google to snowball and check if we can get more articles. So in that, the type of documents we were searching for, first off, were academic journal articles that focus on solar PV. And here we chose to focus on the sub-Saharan Africa region. So those were articles from the 46 countries. And then we also looked at national energy policies, energy acts, energy regulations, and renewable energy development plans in the same region. From there, we wanted to also find relevant policy briefs and look at reports on best practice in solar PV. And for this, we were looking at best practices from anywhere in the world. So from that work, which was quite involving, we have some preliminary findings, and I'm going to share this with you so that you can give us direction and ensure that we have a shared understanding with the committee. So from the national policies in sub-Saharan Africa, we were looking at those that focus on solar PV. And of those, we found that, of course, Kenya is doing very well. So we have the National Energy Policy of 2018. And within the document, we were looking at whether there's a focus on business, solar PV for business and solar PV for households, which is in keeping with what this advisory committee is going to be recommending. And then from our own work in our research under what we are calling the GENS program, we are also interested in gender. So we thought we could also contribute to this committee that gender dimension that we had already started looking at. So we found that, of course, the energy policy in Kenya does have a gender dimension. And then Ghana has the National Energy Policy of 2010, which also does focus on business and households. And then there's the Liberia National Energy Policy of 2009. And then we have the Malawi Energy Policy. And I don't see a year here, so I'll ask Paris to confirm that this policy document did not show the year. Paris, are you with us? Okay, maybe yes, she can. Okay, did this document have a year?
I think I might have left it out, but it should be 2003. The Malawi policy should be 2003.
2006. And then we have the National Energy Policy 2003 of Nigeria. So as you can see, almost all of them focus on both businesses and households, and they have a gender dimension. All the other policies that we looked at do not have a specific focus on solar PV, but we are also happy to share the information that we found out regarding those national policies. However, for this presentation, we chose to focus only on those that already look at solar PV as an important aspect of their national policies. And then from there, we looked at energy acts and energy regulations, and we found that in this regard, Kenya is doing very well because we have the Energy Act of 2019, we have the Environmental Management and Coordination Act, CAP 387, we have the Energy Solar Photovoltaic Systems Regulation 2012, the Energy Solar Water Heater Regulations of 2012, and the Draft Energy Solar Photovoltaic System Regulations of 2019. So in this, again, there does seem to be a focus on either business or households, at least in each of them. Although the Energy Management and Coordination Act is general in that regard. We've also found some policy briefs that will be relevant for this committee. And of course, the first one we found was the KISD one of 2017, which is to accelerate pico solar photovoltaic lighting market in Kenya. And that one has a strong focus on both business and households. And then we have our solar photovoltaic technologies policy brief from South Africa. We have another one from Kenya again, which is solar PV for enhancing electricity access in Kenya. What policies are required? We also found the Kenya Solar PV Market Assessment by KCIC. And then there is the Renewable Energy and Climate Change, Exploring the Policy Options for Africa. So this is a general policy brief that looks at the whole continent. Something happened. Hello? Hello?
Yes, good morning.
Can you still see my screen? My screen disappeared.
No, we can't see your screen now. Something changed.
Yes.
It's probably from your end.
Okay. So let me share again.
Were you sharing the PowerPoint or the PDF? I can share it for you.
I think I was sharing the, let me see. Yeah, please share it for me. I have no idea what has happened on my side. And the shocking thing is that now I don't even have the document with me.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes, I can.
So we can move to
briefs.
Yes, we were at the policy brief. So we also have the Advancing SDG 7 implementation in support of the 2030 agenda. That's a global policy brief, and we found that it does have a focus that would be of interest to us, both in businesses and households. So the next kind of documents that we looked at are the Renewable Energy Development Plan. And these ones, again, we found that Kenya features quite strongly. We have the Least Cost Power Development Plan 2017 to 2037. And then there's the IRENA Africa 2030 Renewable Energy Map of 2015 that looks at the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. We also have a development plan that focuses on Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. That is the Bright Continent, the outlook for utility scale and commercial and industrial solar projects in East Africa. And then we have three others, which is the Rwanda Energy Sector Strategic Plan, Malawi Renewable Energy Strategy, and then the Rural Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan 2016 of Nigeria. And in all of this, there's a focus on both homes and businesses using solar PV. And then in the next slide, we also looked at relevant academic journal articles. And in this regard, we were looking at the most recent articles just going back 10 years. So one of our inclusion criteria was that the article had to have been published since 2010 and after. And from there, we found 10 articles that were of relevance to us. So 2 are from Nigeria, 4 from South Africa, 2 from Kenya, 1 from Ghana, and 1 that looks at several countries. So we found that in terms of academic publication, South Africa features very strongly. But in terms of policy, Kenya seems to be doing quite well in the continent. So here I've just given you a snapshot of the documents that we are looking at. We wanted to look at the theoretical or conceptual framework that was used, the research approach, the main findings, and the gaps. So I'm not going to take you through each one of them individually because they were quite detailed. So our preliminary findings from that will be shared in the next slide. But in this one, we also found what we thought were some best practices, examples of those from around the world. So we wanted to look at the Noor Complex Solar Power Plant in Morocco, the Kamusi Solar Farm in India, the Longyearbyen Dam Solar Park. I'm sure I've said that wrongly, but you'll forgive me. I don't think there's anybody here who speaks Mandarin, so you'll accept my pronunciation of that dam. And this is to be found in China. So in our next slide, where we talk about our preliminary insights, and after I share this, I'm going to invite my team to also dig deeper into that, because they're the ones who are looking at the documents in depth. So the recurring conclusion and gap from most of the journal articles that we found, these are the 10, there is the claim that solar energy is the third most applied sustainable form of energy in Africa, and that's behind hydroelectric power and biorenewables. And then solar energy is seldom commercialized, and when it is, business models are non-existent, and there is little in the way of legislation and policy. Public-private partnerships are absent, and the pricing models are flawed. So focus on best practice in that regard is insufficient. And then the common recommendation in those articles is that there is a need for a framework that allows for more private investment in photovoltaics. 9 out of those 10 articles suggest that government should develop a policy that allows private businesses to invest in solar energy and face fair competition with other forms of energy. So in the next slide. Next slide.
That's the next slide.
Who was it who was sharing? Oh, this is the next slide.
Yep.
Oh, okay. On my side, it's frozen. Has it moved on to?
Yes. So the slide that I'm looking at right now, if everyone is looking at the same, is showing the recommendations for the committee to consider. I hope everyone is seeing the same.
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. So can I just go through them for you,
Okay.
Dr.? Okay. So some of the recommendations that we found, having reviewed all the documents, and we suggest that the committee considers them, is first, development of a clear path to competition enhancement by allowing privatized solar energy distribution. That's in Kenya. The second one is development of local county policy for solar power plants with the proper feasibility study necessary in each of those counties. The third one is an established pricing regime for solar power plants to avoid monopolistic pricing, which is mostly applied in different countries. The fourth one is a national business model for solar energy development. And the last one is inclusion of women in entrepreneurial activities across the solar power value chain, especially having found the gender perspective in different policies and different journal researches. So those are the preliminary recommendations that the team developed. I think that's the only slide that Tamolo was missing.
Okay, great. Thank you, Douglas. I'd also like Perry to just give us more insights on what we found out in terms of policy and what direction we think the committee could take in that regard. Perry, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Amolo. Yeah, so we did look at the policies from Sub-Saharan Africa, and what came out is that Kenya stands out in terms of solar. We've done quite a lot in terms of the regulations and the policies that are in place. So as I was going through all of them, I realized that a lot of the countries that have are talking about solar, they're addressing them in their renewable energy plans or in their development plans, but there isn't really an implementation plan that has been set up. So you find that they are quite ambitious, especially countries like South Africa. They are quite ambitious in their integrated resource plans. So they're talking about renewable energy in general. So I think for Kenya we've done quite well with our solar and everything. So I think there are things that we need to do for this committee is to really follow up on the recommendations that have been set up here, especially in regards to policy, because even if we have a very, very good plan and it's not put in policy, or a very workable guideline is put out, then again we will not really achieve what we want to do. So that is one of the things that came out clearly in all the policies and the journal articles that we were looking at, that in order for solar to really work, we need to have working policies and an implementation framework. So I think that is one of the things that we need to do. And in a report that I was reading by Irina, it stated that if Africa is to increase its renewable energies, the electricity that will be generated can increase to 50% from renewables, that is by 2030, and 75% by 2050. That will account for about 800 gigawatts of electricity. So we are on the right path. And I think once we get your insights on what we have found out so far, then it will be easy for us to move along. But I think so far so good. Kenya it's at the top leading when it comes to policies, but when it comes to the implementation and the project, they're quite few. So I think
Sorry,
that's all.
I got disconnected briefly. Paris.
Yes, Samola?
You're done.
Yes, I think I'm done.
Sorry, you're done. Okay,
yes.
So maybe I'll just give the last word to Douglas, because he's the one who was reading the journal articles. Maybe you could also just tell us how many journal articles we started off with, so that we ended up with the 10.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Amolo. Our search with first of all, we started our search mainly with Scopus, and we started off with 684 journal articles. Those were journal articles that were talking about renewable energy generally. So we started inputting in our inclusion criteria. And when we selected those that have been done in the last 10 years, and those that are looking at different forms of renewable energy, we remained with 108. From the 108, then we cascaded down to reading the abstracts to find that they are relevant to different aspects that we are looking at in renewable energy. So we remained with 74. So out of these 74, we decided to look at those that was focused specifically on solar energy, because we thought, as much as solar energy may be part of renewable energy, when you are developing a renewable energy policy, you might not focus on solar much. There's a tendency to focus on hydroelectric power, because then it's the most form of sustainable energy. So we decided to look at those that focused on solar energy alone. And that's how we ended up at 19. However, there were 9 that were from different countries, mostly Sierra Leone and Gambia, and I think one was from Mauritius. That yes, they were looking at solar energy, but they looked more like opinion pieces than research work, because then they didn't have a proper research framework. They didn't have a proper methodology through which they got their findings. They didn't have a proper outline of their sources. And as much as they were saying that their sources is from government databases and stuff, they didn't give specific numbers or specific variables that would make you be convinced that they actually collected that data from such databases. So we thought that those who are not meeting the criteria in terms of avoidance of bias, because most of them were inclined to arrive at a certain conclusion, whatever come may. So we excluded those 9, and that's how we remained with the 10. When we were looking at these particular articles, we were looking at them from different perspectives. We are looking at them, first of all, from what was the objective of the research or the paper, what was the foundation of its documentation. Second, what were the methods that were used to find that data, because then we want to look at how they engage different stakeholders in terms of, did they engage the government, did they engage the power suppliers, did they engage independent power producers in that country, and so forth. So we looked at that in terms of their methodology, and then we looked at their main findings to understand what did they then find about solar energy in that country or in the country which they were studying. And then lastly, we looked at after all that, have they made a recommendation? And then in that recommendation, how does it tie onto the work that this committee is trying to achieve? So that's how we arrived at those particular recommendations and the gaps that you see there, because then the gaps we, as you can see in this, in the articles that Amolo just shared before, the gaps are basically looking at each and every one of those researches and what the researchers suggested. So that was the process that we went through in terms of finding those. And then the last piece of our reading was to find as many as possible in terms of the best practices across the world that we can learn from in terms of installation of solar PV in those countries. And so we looked at the top 25 in the world. 2 of the top 25 are in Africa. One is in Morocco, that's the Noor project that Dr. Amolo shared, and one is in Egypt. However, we looked at sub-Saharan Africa specifically because looking at it from that perspective, if you look at the Arabic African countries as part of the rest of us, and you make a conclusion based on that, then you're likely to conclude that Africa has a very good framework for solar PV or solar energy, which would be a misrepresentation of the situation in the other countries. So that's why we looked at sub-Saharan Africa specifically and tried to exclude the Arabic countries of Africa. Some of the countries that have the best practices in terms of solar PV are Morocco, with the largest in the world. It's not complete yet, but it will be the largest in the world. But China, India, and the United States are the other ones that were very good best practice countries that we could look at. So that was the process of our research, and we learned a lot in terms of what this committee can do in business modeling, in developing a policy that can allow independent power producers to plug into the energy value chain very well. And also, just from a gender-based perspective, we learned that it is more viable when developing such a policy to include women across the value chain, because then one of the main findings was that women are the main users of energy in most of the homes and also businesses. But then when they are not included, then we tend to not develop the right needs analysis and also not the right consumption framework. That means that sometimes we mess around with the pricing because then we don't include the key stakeholders, because then they're the key stakeholders who plug into that particular value chain across the chain. So across the entrepreneurial chain, we learned that it's very important to include women. It was a recommendation in a few, not many, but then from the few that had tried to implement it, it had worked so well in those countries. So that's what we found while reading those journals. Thank you so much, Dr.
Great. Thank you so much, Douglas, for that. Thank you for that comprehensive overview. So as I had mentioned, when we joined this committee, we are working as a research team because we are already involved in 2 other projects that are looking at energy. So a lot of this work feeds already into the other work that you're doing. So that's why you see us working as a team. To finish off, the last slide, there's a slide after this one. Chair?
There's a slide after this one. Let me just find it.
Yes.
On the
whoever was controlling this. Okay. Who is
actually
controlling the slideshow?
I'm the one controlling it. Actually, this is the last. This is the last slide.
Oh, okay.
That we have.
Something happened. So can you see the slide with the picture of the women? Okay. Something happened. Something happened during.
Email has got the photo, but this one doesn't have its in. Eh?
Oh, okay.
Okay, let me.
Very strange. It's okay. Don't worry. No, don't worry about it. It was just images I found of women getting very involved in the installation of solar power panels. And what I just wanted to finish off with is that, oh, okay. Yes, this one. was to just give us some inspiration of what kind of process we would like to inspire with this policy brief. So in our work, we are looking towards having our report done in the next 2 weeks. But from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that we have strong inputs from do much to comment, suggestions, and directions on how you want us to complete this deliverable. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amolo and team. I don't know how we can do a round of applause on online, but I think yes. Your team has done a wonderful job in within a short time and in coming up with interesting findings. I think at the moment we will open it up for comments and discussions. I think just so that it is guided, I think the comments we want to hear are there areas where there should have been more emphasis and it's not appearing here, or questions around clarifications on what the team found out, because we're trying to zero in on our approach. So let me open up the floor. I see someone has raised their hand, Catherine Nyambala. How does that show now? But please, let's open up for Q&A. I don't know if anyone has got a question. Just unmute and ask.
Hello.
And introduce yourself, please, because not everybody knows you. I'm the only one privileged to know everyone here. Thank you.
Hello. Can I start?
Humphrey, please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Anthony Langat from Kengen. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, we can hear you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, the team, for the job well done. I just wanted to add something which I've seen, I don't know that has been captured, maybe in detail in the report. If you go through the I've had a privilege of reading some of the documents. So one of the things maybe we can add is the challenges which is affecting adoption of solar PV in Kenya. Because if you read a number of the documents, like one of the one which has been done very well is the one from KCIC, you will find there are a number of challenges which are affecting the adoption of solar PV in Kenya. So you'll find there's the issue about quality, the training of technicians, and also you'll find there's also a gap. If you look at our current policy document, the incentives has been given more to the business, but no incentive has been given to the households. If you find like the zero rated of tax is more beneficial to the business, but we don't have something around household. Then maybe my last question would go to Dr. Otuoma. I don't know whether KEBS was invited, because I looked at it, because if you look at most of the documents shared online, the biggest gap has been around the quality of the solar PV within Kenya. I don't know whether we need to involve them so that we also maybe, as we prepare the document, we can capture, is there a gap in the current standard, Kenyan standard, that allows substandard product into the market? Because one of the biggest challenge actually is around quality. If you talk to anybody, tell you who has used a solar PV product, will tell you it's around quality. So I thought maybe, so those, my big input is actually the challenges that affects adoption of solar PV in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I think we can take 2 more comments and then we can have responses to those ones.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Eric Ohaga from New Pair. I also want to take this chance to really thank the team for the good work that they have done on these proposals. And I also want to just reiterate that when you look at some of the data, and I want to talk from the operational point of view. We look at the world and the contribution of renewable energy, in which solar is one of it. Currently stands at 9%. And when we come to Africa, the contribution of renewable energy in the energy mix is only at 4%. And when we come back home in Kenya, the contribution of renewable energy, in which solar is one of it, contributes to 15%. I think the question we should be asking ourselves, what is it that is hampering the adoption of this renewable energy? I think if we can answer that question, even as we prepare this policy, that will go a long way in ensuring that we uptake the most required renewable energy. I think that one did not come out very clearly on the presentation. Another clarification that I wanted to get from the team on the size. When you talk about plant, you talk about the solar plant, what are we exactly making reference to in terms of the size, in terms of megawatts? You made reference to Morocco. I really wanted to know what plant size were we talking about when you make reference to solar for businesses and solar for household. Another clarification is on the, and this is based on the recommendation that was given by the team for a roadmap to allow private sectors to get into generating power in this country. I just wanted to know if that contradicts what is already available in the country in terms of net metering that is provided for in the Energy Act 2016 that allows private players to come and generate power up to 1 megawatt and then sell through net metering to the off-taker, which is already also privatized, that anybody can become an off-taker, and anybody who has the capability to generate up to 1 megawatt is at liberty to do that and then connect to the grid. I think I'll stop at that stage. If I could just get those clarifications, I would really appreciate. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. One more comment, anyone else?
Meg, I can say something.
Yes, Hampering, go ahead.
Yeah, recently when I was in China,
please introduce yourself, and then, because not everybody knows everybody except me. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Humphrey Lumadede Mudoga. I am a research scientist, 3D, Kenya Industrial Research Development Institute, and I'm alternate to Sarah Kwati, who is the one who is the representing Hildi in this committee. I go ahead now. Recently, when I was in China and I looked at some of the issues on solar, I had some questions there, and they gave me some answer, which touches on how the whole situation can be handled by a country. And I'm happy China was captured here as one which is implementing solar. And they had this idea that they look at the consumers, the regulator, the producers, the business people, and the standards. These people form a kind of a committee which will be looking at some of these issues, because they come not on one day, they come on several days. And this is how this committee or this kind of organization comes together and deals with these issues. So I was bringing this issue here, that we can look at how also in Kenya, the consumer, regulator, producer, the business people and the people doing standards, how they can be meeting regularly, see how they can answer the question of implementing solar activity in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Humphrey. Is there anyone else with a rejoinder or a comment? Then we can have a discussion.
Yes, Geoffrey. My name is Catherine Nyambala from Kengen. I have a simple comment, which is a follow-up. Engineer Ohaga had already mentioned some of the things I wanted to say. I just want to talk about the ease of the net metering, the regulatory environment. Into these policies, we need to build in something that makes it easy for somebody to be able to get all the due licenses they need for net metering, especially depending on the capacity of the solution that one is providing. The big players might not find it a headache, but for the smaller players, the current regulatory environment is not friendly. The second thing I want to mention is that I belong to a group of ladies called Women in Sustainable Energy, who have been trained as solar instructors. So myself and my team of ladies will be available to support the gender perspective of this project. I thank Dr. Otuoma for inviting me to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good to know you're I think they're called WISE, the group you referred to.
Yes, I'm a member of WISE. I'm a founding member of WISE.
Oh, yes, pleasure. So I think so that we can have a discussion here, let me try and summarize the comments we have in front of us. So Antonio Kengen referred to the issues around challenges. I think he was more concerned that the challenges issue do not really come out in the review. I'm looking at issues around incentives and quality, policy incentives in terms of financial incentives and quality. And then Eric raised very important issues around what is hampering adoption. We need to answer that. And a very important issue around plant size. And I think as a committee, we have to also agree that what plant size are we looking at here? Shall we have ourselves a limit so that it's easier to give policy recommendations on? Because if the sector is wide and we cannot, we need to zero in maybe. And then Humphrey refers to maybe some association as a solution. And then Catherine has also referred to the issue of net metering. So, Dr. Molo, have you got any thoughts on these comments?
Chair.
Yes, Dr. Otuoma.
There's an issue that the first gentleman, Anthony, brought about Kenya Bureau. I wanted to clarify and then leave the technical bits to Dr. Amolo and her team. Thank you.
Please do. Then you could go fast and address that quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the reason this solar power for houses and businesses policy advisory committee is thin on number of institutions. In Nakosti, we thought we could have 7 institutions. So just for Anthony's information, Kenya Bureau of Standards, other than the directorates which deal, for example, with the issues administration and corporate affairs, it has 3 directorates. So one is standards, another one is metrology, and another one is quality control. So the one of standards is also very thin on personnel who are conversant in all areas relevant to what we may want to do here. In fact, in the standards directorate, they have technical committees. As of 2019, they had 109 technical committees. I chair one of the technical committees which deals with issues dosimetry, radiometry, and non-destructive testing. So how the standards, how Kenya Bureau works is if you think something is of paramount importance, you impress upon them, then they create a technical committee to come up with standards in that area. And that technical committee, whatever standards they either come up with, they can be adopted, or you may come up with standards straight from nothing, and then Kenya Bureau of Standards will take it as a Kenyan standard. So that's why we do not have Kenya Bureau of Standards here. We have instead from industry, we have KIRDI, because KIRDI, they actually have a department which deals with energy. And lastly, being a physicist, I can, and I'm sure if the gentlemen from the physics department are here, physics department, for example, they have installed a 3 kilowatt solar system. But on a very good day, which is usually December, January, February, when it is a clear blue sky, that 3 kilowatt system, when we measure it using physics equipment, the best we've ever got is 2.8 kilowatts, not the 3 kilowatts, which is touted as the capacity of those solar panels. And the last thing, there's a fellow physicist. He has written a very good book. It is called It's called Sustainable Energy Without Hot Air. So in this book, Sustainable Energy Without Hot Air, is my namesake. You can Google it. He measures outputs from different energy sources on what people who are in electricity issues call capacity factor. Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me that opportunity.
Thanks for clarifying, Dr. Otoma. But there could be a stakeholder for us to engage, if I understand correctly, at the stakeholder consultation stage.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Mo.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, members, for all your comments and suggestions. From what I've heard, I see that we need to dig deeper into the situation in Kenya, because I think most of the comments were referring to unearthing a lot more about what is happening in Kenya. So, for example, in terms of the challenges to adoption, the uptake, the roadmap for involving the private sector, and then there's of course the mention of the net metering and the business models around that. So what we can do is we can look further into the Kenyan situation so that we make sure whatever we are recommending is actually relevant for this country. But as an overview, we will first give the picture of what is happening in Sub-Saharan Africa, as we've already done. And then more specifically, I think we need to maybe look at some documents from EPRA so that we can understand a lot more about the regulatory framework and what the challenges could be. One thing I would mention is that we are doing the literature review, so we have to base everything we do based on a document that is already in existence. So we would be very happy if you share with us any documents that we did not highlight there. You all have the presentation, so you can just look through, and if you see that there's a document, a crucial document that we're missing, please feel free to share it with us as we compile our report. I also think that a lot of the questions that have been raised can be answered through stakeholder engagement. So we might not necessarily find the answer in the document, but we can raise the question or and show the gaps so that when we go into the interviews in the second deliverable, we get the answers to those questions. I think there's a lot of knowledge and there are a lot of people who are experts, but some of that information may not be in a document, so we don't have access to it. But it's very important, of course, for us to capture that knowledge as we move forward. So we are very happy to get more comments in writing. And what we can do is that we can compile a first draft, share it with the team, and then get comments within the document. So you can track changes in the comments, or the chair can lead on that. And then we finish the report in time for the 2 weeks that we have left. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. May I just respond to something that I think it's Eric from Nopea who asked.
Please do that.
Eric
briefly.
asked about the size of the solar power plants that you are looking at. So I just want to give you a brief overview of that. One, we were looking at the power plants from a best practices point of view, not from specifically a size point of view. So we are looking at the how and the why of how they arrived at what they did. But then to just answer your question then, the Noor Complex solar power plant in Morocco is a 580 megawatt capacity power plant. So it is estimated to supply about 1 million people once completed. It's being completed at the end of this year. The Kamuthi solar plant from India, it has about 2.5 million solar modules. It's expected to supply about 50,000 homes, and it's a 648 megawatt plant. The Longyaxia Dam solar plant in the solar park in China. It's 25 square kilometers in size. It is an 850 megawatt capacity. However, it currently produces just 220 megawatt hours of electricity annually, and it supplies 200,000 homes at the moment. So those are the sizes that you are looking at, just to answer your perspective. From a Kenyan point of view, we also looked at the Garissa solar power plant. I think it's operated by some investors from China. It's a 50 megawatt plant. I'm not so sure whether it's producing to capacity yet, because there was no much documentation of how much it's producing at the moment and how much it is supplying or who it is supplying at the moment to that level. So yes, that's what we looked at, and we do not think that the recommendations that we are giving are contradicting the net metering. And Catherine Nyambala captured it very well. That as much as that net metering applies and it's very good, it's only favorable to the big players. And we are looking at a framework that will provide a perfect competition market. So the small players should also be considered as stakeholders, and also the households. I think that was captured by Anthony. There's very little incentive in terms of what the households get. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Just to add very briefly that in terms of best practice, Chair, you can also give direction on what type of plants you want us to look at. Because some of the large plants might not be as appropriate for the Kenyan situation, but they could be very useful to learn from. So we are very happy to get suggestions on what type of plants we should be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe that's the issue we can discuss quickly. I think if you look at the market in Kenya, there are the large power plants indeed now. There's 40 megawatts being developed, 50 megawatts in Garissa, which is a complete. And then if you come down a bit, there are some which are being used by businesses. So in the range of small megawatts to 100 of kilowatts by the large businesses. And then if you come down to the homesteads, you find 5 watts, 10 watts, up to a kilowatt. I think as a committee, we must take a view and say that this committee should focus on this kind of range. And if you allow me to suggest, and we could discuss this, is we could look at, plans, in the range of small megawatts, so up to a maximum of, let's say, 5 megawatts or a megawatt and below, and also for the homesteads starting from 5 watts, 10 watts, 100 watts, because this is where the issue is. This is where the difficulty is in our market. I think the large plants, by virtue of them being large, can afford to navigate and lobby and make their plans happen. But a small business and a household are just unable to and need more help in terms of a framework which they can easily use to connect their basically to use solar. Would that be? And the other question I had was possibly for Eric is, I know last time you had mentioned you have the draft net metering regulations. Is that something you can share, especially with the team, so that they can also review it in Kenya? Because that is not yet in place, it's not yet implemented, as far as I know. Maybe you could comment on that, Eric, subsequently. But what are people's views around what kind of size should we look at? Because it's important to limit it.
Thank you, Chair. I think, could I go?
Please do.
If I understood this, the role of this committee was basically on households and businesses. And we look at the Kenyan scenario and even East African scenario, these operate under various regimes. Like now, when you start talking about 40 megawatts, there's another regime. When you start talking about anything more than 1 megawatt, there is some feed-in tariff regime. Then you go into the normal power capacity regime. I thought from the beginning we were talking about solar for households and businesses, which basically is under net metering, which is capped under 1 megawatt. I don't know, I need to get that clarification so that we are clear from the beginning that we are dealing with the solar for households and solar for businesses. And then what are we talking about, so that we then be clear on the various regimes that we have solar energy.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Generic. That's a valid comment. It's also my understanding that way, but we never really documented the number. So maybe it is important to agree now, so that even as the research team goes ahead, there's a cap to it. Is there someone else who has a divergent view, or that's what I'm understanding as well? I will assume silence to mean we are all concurring with that view. And then in the Kenyan scheme of things, the power plants below a megawatt have got a certain framework in which they operate. So, and Eric, do you have the draft necessary regulations which you could share for review? Are these complete? Do you know what status they're in?
I have the draft, but the problem is that I don't know that I have the authority to share it before they are ratified. That is the dilemma I am in. I have all the regulations at the draft stage.
And Dr. Otuoma, is it possible for NACOSI to write to EPRA and request for these regulations so that they can feed into our literature review, or how do we tackle this situation where we put draft regulations, which I understand are near final and are unlikely to change, and will be very useful for our work? Or shall we wait until they're released? How do we tackle this?
Thank you, Chair. So the way government works, I'll talk generally for a bill before it becomes an act. So, for example, the Energy Act, just before the president signed it to become an act, it was a bill. And just before it went to the president as a bill, it was in Parliament. So in Parliament, it underwent the first, second, and third reading. So before the first reading, and this is where I think Engineer Eric Ohanga is coming from. So before the first reading in Parliament, it is normally a proprietary document. It belongs to the executive. So until the executive releases it to Parliament, Parliament is the one which usually allows publication. So I'm also privy to the same document, but I may not share it with people who are not in the executive. And so that's the position, how government works, not only in Kenya, all bureaucracies. Thank you, Chair.
And as a committee, can we write through you to EPRA to allow us review this, or it is premature? Or how do we tackle this? Because they are very important for what sort of recommendation we'll make at the end of the day.
So until they move from the executive and they go to the domain of Parliament, they will remain confidential. That's how it is. So even if I wrote to them, that is even if Acosti wrote to them.
These are policy regulations. Sorry, sir. This will not go to Parliament.
If Acosti wrote to them, us in Acosti, we are part of the executive. So we are privy to them, but let's say now somebody like, let's say Dr. Amolo and her team, these are not government people. They are people in academia, including yourself. So you are not vetted. You are not privy to what is confidential. But once it goes to Parliament, then it is published for everybody to read and give comments. And that's when this team can also have access to them. But Eric may have another view, but that is how government works. Thank you, Chair.
So we then assume in terms of Dr. Molo's work that they don't exist until they're in public domain. That's what I'm. So we don't review it for now. We leave it out. Maybe just say
reviewing it unless you are invited to that team. Reviewing it at the moment is until that team moves it to a domain where it can be shared, and that's why our arrangement in government is like it is. We have the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. Legislature, the people who share everything, because the moment it will hit there, they will even put it in the newspapers. They'll put it on the website, and it will cease being confidential, so that anybody who's a stakeholder, that is the Kenyans, and the parliamentarians represent the Kenyans, they can give their inputs. If this committee didn't have academia on it, then we would even have access to the draft. But this committee has, and this is why I love NACOSTI. NACOSTI, we are allowed to relate with people in the executive, with people who are not in the executive, and that's why we have you. And as I told you when we started this meeting, in my personal opinion, I usually see academia has the brains, and you can see the quality of what Dr. Molo has presented. These are brains. If this was to be done by us in executive, we wouldn't do half of what Douglas has explained, going through 700 documents, coming up to 10. And I haven't seen that in executive. So this is how the system is. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well noted. So I think we will move along until they are publicly available. Or we could also at the stakeholder stage speak to EPRA and see what we just interview them and see what kind of feedback they give us with regard to that. I see someone has raised their hand, Mr. Chepkonga. In terms of time, I think we'll try and wrap up before 1:15. So we have 10 more minutes or so.
Chair,
yes.
I registered for 2 hours because I thought the work from the university, that is Dr. Molo and team, is of extreme importance to us in executive to appreciate. And it would be good we let people give them inputs, because they'll retreat and do a final bit in 2 weeks' time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we have 2 hours. We could do another round of questions. I see Mr. Chepkonga has put his hand up. Please go ahead.
Chepkonga is my colleague. He has that habit so that we notice he's present. But if he comes in, he'll talk. But while he's still coming, I have something which I would like Kirdi to elaborate. There's the policy brief, I think in one of the slides on the preliminary findings. This policy brief was on accelerating Pico solar photovoltaic lighting market in Kenya. And it was done by Kirdi in November 2017. Could Kirdi explain to us, being the owners of this policy brief, what it was all about, much as the university people have found it out? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Kirdi, do you have any comments on that? Humphrey, you may have any comment on that?
Hello.
Yeah, good morning, Sarah. Welcome.
Oh, good morning to you all.
Introduce yourself for people who may not know you, and then you.
Okay, I'm Sarah Kwacho of Kenya Industrial Research and Development Institute. I'm a research scientist there. So thank you so much, Dr. Molo, for the presentation. You've covered a lot, and actually I've really understood what you are doing. So to part of the document that you are talking about, actually it was done by some people from our department. I wasn't part of it, but whatever they did was mapping out of the types of solar technologies that are in the market. So they did the survey, walked into various counties, check on what's being done, some of the challenges that people are experiencing with the solar PV systems and the products. Then they came up with that document. Thank you, Chairman. That's what I know about what they did.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Is there any other comment from anyone else? On my side, I had a comment. Now talking as a researcher and as a practitioner, I think Kenya has done very well, especially on the Pico PV side of things. So the small solar home systems. I think globally after India, Kenya is number 2 in terms of sales. So maybe also for the research team, you could look at those publications, especially from GOGLA, called Global Off-Grid Lighting Alliance, and there's a link between why that has been the case. Also links with the mobile money, because these are available through PAYGO system. So and there's plenty of information around that, because those are solar systems used by homesteads. So, but it's not really in any. It's just it's businesses which have done this without any policy support. And what kind of policy support would this industry require? Yet it's doing very well already globally. So that was my first comment. And the other one was on your report spoke about pricing, and I wonder what kind of pricing you are referring to here, given that there's always mistrust between consumers and business and the utility, and therefore there's literature around promoting self-consumption, so using solar power for own use than even trying to sell excess power to the grid. And I think the tension is normally between, shall I sell the excess, or shall I just put a system which allows me to consume my own energy only, because I don't trust that the utility will pay, Kenya Power will pay me at the end of the month, or even knock off from my bill. So policies around promoting self-consumption as opposed to policies for exporting excess energy to the grid is also an interesting topic. Thank you. Those are my comments. Is there anyone else who has a comment, or shall we wrap up?
Can I just ask, what did you said Global Lighting Alliance?
Yes, it's called GOGLA.
Just repeat. Global
Off-Grid Lighting Alliance.
Oh, okay. Global Off-Grid Lighting Alliance. Then I also wanted to ask, do you have documents from Strathmore Research Center, the Energy Research Center? We checked your website and were not able to access some of your documents. So if you could share some of the research you've done, it would also be quite helpful. Since I imagine it is very relevant for the Kenyan context. Thanks.
Yes, we can share that with. Is there anyone else with a comment? The floor is still open.
Sorry, the last you mentioned pricing. Would you know any documentation or research that would help us understand that better? If you have any recommendations, again, please share that with us.
Yes, I will do. In fact, my question was to you as to what you meant by pricing, because the most of the use cases here is just for own consumption and less for export to the grid. So, and I'm not aware of any other country in Africa where consumers are being paid for exporting excess energy. So maybe there's a misunderstanding in terms of pricing. What is pricing?
Yeah, Douglas, would you like to clarify?
Just repeat the question.
It's a clarification around your presentation had a question on pricing.
Okay. Okay.
And you recommended something on pricing. Maybe you could just clarify what that means.
Yeah, you had mentioned quite a few things. So I was wondering which one you want me to clarify. So about pricing, we were looking at it from the point of view of price modeling, especially because one, as you mentioned, there's a lot of mistrust between consumers and businesses, and one of the reasons is because consumers do not understand why they pay certain prices or why there are certain price differentials between regions and between different types of consumers. So if we could have a price model that one is sustainable for businesses, two is also sustainable for the consumers, so that we know, for example, in the oil industry, part of the energy sector, the government announces the prices on a regular basis. So then that level of mistrust does not exist because the consumers understand that this is the price and this is the origin of the price. But if you ask somebody that how much do you pay for your electricity, they'll tell you how much they pay, and most of them will tell you KPLC, we don't know how they are charging this price. So if we can have a price model that can be understood or can be communicated through a particular framework, we are looking at the consumer price, not the producer price.
Noted. Thank you.
Add something, please, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I think I also had some that recommendation of monopolistic pricing. I think the answers are there with EPRA. All these sources of energy have a formula. They have a financial formula with all the variants and all the fixed charges put to them, ranging from solar, of course, wind, and even when we come to thermal energy. So if anyone wanted to see or to know how the computation is done in terms of the pricing for the various tariffs, I think that information is available with EPRA. They should be able to supply you with that information and how pricing is done, so that you can understand the various variables.
Thank you very much. I think we'll be coming to you for that.
Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, the reason we have Engineer Eric Ohanga and the other colleagues from government, of course, they're on the implementing side, as we are more on the advisory side, is for them to shed as much light as is allowable to like the issues you are raising on pricing. What I can inform Douglas and Dr. Amolo is that in Africa, I only know 2 countries where they actually pay people who produce electricity and sell to the distributors. Like if it was in Kenya, let's say Kenya Power, and this is Ghana and South Africa, because they already have this net metering being implemented. And of course, in countries outside Africa, the same thing happens. Like for example, in Germany, that's how they are actually encouraging people to be co-producers of electricity. And then my last comment, there's a time I visited a new power plant in Morocco, but I was there on another issue to do with nuclear. They have 2 research reactors, nuclear research reactors. But when I was in this new solar power plant in Morocco, when they took us there for a tour, so the way I understood it at that time it was producing 160 megawatts. And actually in 2020, it will be 2,000 megawatts. And it is more of a solar park. And Morocco, the way the system there is, they have a king. And unlike Kenya, where we debate a lot of things, there the king decided this is going to be a solar park. They have something like 6,000 plus acres of land, and they do what is called concentrated solar plants. So they, for those who understand the science, the sunlight there is very good. They don't have, actually it's a desert. They don't, so what they do is they boil water using mirrors, and these mirrors follow the sun. And as Douglas explained, it is, he said it is now more than 500 megawatts. So those are projects which are more or less done by, just like we have things like Konza Techno City, for example. That's more of a government project. It's not a household project or a small business project. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well noted. Is there anyone else with the?
Yes, I have something to say. This is Humphrey again.
Yes, Humphrey.
Yes. Now, when I was in Ghana, also, it is now discussing bringing women into the awareness program. We were discussing with the colleagues there, and they said that it is very difficult just to call women and bring them into meeting and tell them this is how solar is done, and then they agree and they take it up. So he said that one of the ways is to, when there is a medical clinic, for example, that one, quite a number of women will come to the medical clinic. Then you can have a solar demonstration or a solar information awareness program next. From there, a few women will start getting into this matter, and later on, we will have very many women now accepting or participating in solar activities. So in our bringing women, it is not very easy just to be calling them to meeting. You'll have to find something else which attracts them, and when they are there, then you bring in the issue of solar, and quite a number will pay. The next point I want to say is the issue of, because people know solar is when there is sun. When there is no sun, there is no power. So the issue of batteries, there has been pros and cons about it, the cost, and also the environmental sustainability of the batteries. Those are issues I think as we go along, we should also think about. Thank you.
Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, what Humphrey is saying is one perspective when you do it from bottom up. South Africa, when the late Nelson Mandela was released from prison and became a president, used to have surplus electricity. South Africa was producing like 44,000 megawatts in 1991, thereabouts. So what he did when he became president in 1994, he decreed that all households should have electricity so that women do not go fetching firewood, and in the process losing out on the time when the boy child is reading, the girl child is fetching firewood, the risks which are associated with fetching firewood. We know the terrible things which men do to women when they're in the forest looking for firewood. And lastly, when you cook with firewood, you inhale a lot of terrible smoke, which affects our women folk with lung diseases more than our men folk who are the recipients of the cooking from the kitchen. So what happened in South Africa because of that policy shift from the presidency, now the generation who are born post-1994, most women in South Africa now make it to college, for example, unlike before. So there are two ways you can do it: top up, top down, or bottom up. So since we have very powerful ladies on this forum, like Engineer Catherine Nyambala and of course Dr. Molo, it would be good to hear their perspectives on men discussing the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
And they joined us.
Okay, now that my name has been called out, Chairman, I just want to give one point only. I know the others we will argue with David elsewhere. I just want to give one comment further to the others that have been given, that one of the ways that can be used is to have a women-only training. Because having been in a class full of men, I know the difference in dynamics when you have a class full of women only with women trainers. and in the normal classes. In fact, when there has been a previous call for sponsored training in solar, I think only men applied until the day they decided to do a women-only class. So that is the only one I'll talk about for now. And as we continue to engage, we'll bring more points to the table. Thank you.
I guess I have to say something also, now that I've been called a powerful woman. But I think someone who's even more powerful than me is Paris, because she read all the policy documents in Sub-Saharan Africa. And she was specifically looking at how the gender perspective is framed in this document. So maybe, Paris, if you could add a word or two on gender framing in policy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amola. So first to answer Dr. Otoma's question on how we feel about men talking about the gender issue, I would say we're very happy, because for us to really get a solution, we need both parties. So for us to get gender inclusion, we don't mean that now we forget the role of the man and we put it just the woman. So I think I'm in support of the women training that Engineer Catherine was talking about, because a lot of women feel intimidated when they have to do the training with men and all of that. But anyway, that's a story for another time. So when I was looking at the energy policies, almost nearly all of them actually, the energy policies have a gender dimension. And women in the policy sector, and when you look at those policies, they're characterized in different ways. So there are governments that are seeing women as beneficiaries, quite a lot of them. I would say I would put an 85% of the policies that we have been able to look at see women as beneficiaries. Others will see them as just a vulnerable group that we need to bring solutions for them. Then one of the other trends that was coming out very strongly is that all of these policies view women as decision makers, either at the household level or even at the policy level, such that, as Dr. Otoma has said, that is very true. Even in our previous research studies, we found out that at the household level, the main decision maker when it comes to the type of energy that is being used and even the amount of energy is the woman. But the financier is the man. So we cannot have one in the absence of the other. So we are happy that Dr. Otoma, you're not against it, and you're actually in support of the gender dimension when it comes to policies, when it comes to energy. And in one of the reports that I was reading, I think it's from Sierra Leone, and another one from Ghana, where they were saying that what needs to be done is to make sure that at the university level, that is actually in an energy policy, that at the university level, you need to have these technological courses and courses on renewable energy, and you have to encourage more girls to apply or more women to apply in order to make sure that we increase the number of women in the energy sector, and especially when it comes to the renewable technologies. So there are various things that we can do on that, but the fact that we have support from men as well, it is really, really important. So gender is paramount, and we can't do away with it. If we need the project to succeed, we must have women in that. Thank you, Dr. Amola.
Please allow me to add before you close on the topic. Yes, I would like to echo my colleague that we really appreciate when men start talking about women matters, because definitely the problems of half of the team cannot be solved by half of the team. It needs to be solved by the entire team. I just want to add that we need to bring the issue of productive use into the narrative. Dr. Otoma has spoken about ease of operations at the home front, where you now create more time for doing more value-adding things. But if we need to bring into the conversation, if women can have small cottage industries at home that use power, then they have a bigger incentive to support the system, including being in the production line themselves of developing simple solar solutions for home use. So I think we should add that into the discussion as we progress. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I hear correctly now, as a committee, the gender dimensions is important, and we all agree. And our policy should be sensitive. Our policy brief should be sensitive to the gender dimension. So that I have noted. And what you have said, Catherine, is very important also. Productive use is critical. In fact, the problem we now as a country is there's just lack of demand of power. And it also ties in the issue of entrepreneurship, because this committee also is tasked with promoting or identifying ways of promoting entrepreneurship, which can then use solar power. Because what's the point of having solar power if it is not being used productively? At least once you have satisfied your home requirements of lighting and all, then the next step really is productive uses. So that's an important point, and maybe for Dr. Amolo and her team to look at that link between solar energy and also productive uses, and how that has been promoted in other countries. Do we have further points of views and comments?
Chair, I have a question about the formatting of the document itself. We were thinking of a document that, sorry, somebody's microphone is causing echo.
It is Sarah. Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I was just thinking about the document itself, and we had in mind like a 5-page document, definitely not nothing more than 10 pages, because we want it to be a synthesis of everything we've read, but then we'll provide a full reference list. So I wanted direction from the committee, if that is in order.
Thank you for that. Dr. Otomo, would you have a comment there, given that this is something you do regularly?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, we at benchmarking level, we do not wish to, we do not have guidelines of how long the document should be. It is only at the very, very final stage, especially depending on how we produce our papers. So, for example, when we do a policy brief to cabinet, we usually do 4 to 5 pages maximum. That is a policy brief to cabinet, and cabinet, for information of colleagues here who are not in executive, is the president and the cabinet secretaries. So I've had experiences with different ministers. For example, my favorite minister was Dr. Sally Kosgei. She could read even 50 pages, like a thesis, and mark here what she likes as a tick, what she doesn't like, X, where she doesn't understand, question marks, and make you discuss it just the way you do a thesis in a class. My worst minister was the current deputy president. He is not able to read anything beyond 4 pages. So when it comes to that stage is when we restrict to 4 or 5 pages, if it is a policy brief to cabinet. But for benchmarking, for me, even if you give me 40 pages, 50 pages, I can read. And also my colleagues in Nacosti. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well noted. So so Dr. Mola, I think you have the leeway to make it as long as short as you want, and then based on the comments received in that document, then it can still be reduced or go up. So I think you have the leeway there.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other question, clarifications? I see someone has raised their hand.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, Sarah.
Yes, Sarah. I have a comment. I don't know whether we should just check the local regulations, or we could also check the World Trade Organizations, or now they're linked to the local content policies. Because I know, like in India, they came up with the local content policy, which had some issues with the world trade businesses, international trade business. So I think even in the literature review, we should capture something on world trade regulations and how they are linked to the local content policies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll have a look at that.
If I understand correctly, you're coming from the perspective that one of our sub-objectives was just to look at how we can have more local content in the solar power industry, and now you're linking with the WTO, and if there's any conflict there.
Chair.
Yes.
I didn't understand very well what Kirdi was explaining about our World Trade Organization and what we are trying to do.
Okay, Daktari, what I'm saying, I've been reading some articles and I realized that there are some policies like for the local content. When some people are developing them, sometimes they never go well with the international trade businesses. So I think we should also check on how the World Trade, I think they have some regulations that are on local content, the restrictions that we should have when we are developing the local content policies. So I'm just requesting the team to be checking so that whatever we shall come up with does not create some controversies or biasness to the international business. Okay.
Chair, it may be nice if Kirdi actually joined Dr. Molo and team. We are all on this benchmarking. So if you have some information which may be of use, it will be good you share it. Dr. Molo is only the team leader of that particular slot of that particular deliverable, but we are all in it. So if you have information which may assist in making up this report, now that they've done this is a preliminary report. The final one will be 2 weeks from today. It will be good. We feel free, not only you as Kirdi, but all of us, we feel free to interrogate and also give information so that the final document is something any of us can explain to our decision makers. We don't need to call Dr. Molo to do the explaining to our decision makers. So for example, personally, after this, I will do a 1 and maximum 2-pager to my DG because he's keen on what we are doing. Actually, for your information, my current DG, his background is civil engineering, and he's passionate about the types of homes Kenyans have and how those homes enhance their quality of life. And his research is in those areas of civil engineering. So I'm sure even the rest of us, we will do something to our respective director generals or CEOs or heads of department. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And indeed, I echo those comments that we encourage flow of information within the committee. So if you have a strong background or opinion on something, it is we work as a team here. Is there any other comment or any last minute points of views, or shall we now let Dr. Molo and our team go back and finalize this? And just for Kirdi's understanding, so this document will then guide our next phase of the committee's work, which is stakeholder mapping and stakeholder engagement. And I believe in the next meeting, we also agree that Kirdi will present preliminary ideas around the kind of stakeholders we will engage. So that is just a note. And the other one is on the housekeeping, is also on the budget. We did share a revised budget, and maybe Dr. Otomo, you could add a comment here because it looks there could be need for other organizations to chip in. Maybe you could add a bit on that. I saw your comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the way, for example, in NACOST we work, right now in July, we are finalizing our current budget for this coming, the current 2020-2021 financial year, because it started on 1st July. So what I did with what Strathmore University shared as concerns budget, I shared it with my director and also my director general. And now what I'm waiting for is for our board, that is the NACOST board, to give us a determination on how our budget will look like. But going from the sentiments from the my two seniors, my director and my director general, the picture I got, but it's not final until we get the board's commitment, is that this budget, the budget from the NACOST side, may cater for meetings, and it may cater for like the stakeholder forum. That is the main where we will present the advisory policy committee's findings to stakeholders and the final write-up. So when it comes to any visitations, that one, they didn't appear very keen on it because of the thinness of our budget. So normally what we do in other activities where we relate with our shareholders, and for this committee, for example, I had mentioned from the outset that we are privileged to have people from energy, and people from energy, from my experience in energy, is unlike university or us in Ministry of Education mainstream. They are more liquid. So it would enhance this committee's status if they were also forthcoming in what they could do. For example, now that in this particular meeting, we have, for example, 3 individuals from KenGen. I'm sure as an entity, KenGen can organize a visit to one of its power plants where the committee may appreciate how energy is generated by KenGen. And that will not be a cost for NACOST to bear, but it will be a cost KenGen can absorb. But it is for KenGen to step to the plate and do the offer. The same story with Nuclear Power and Energy Agency. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Otoma. Well noted. So if I understand correctly, on the budget item of about 7 million shillings we sent, a bulk of it NACOST can meet, but should we organize any visitations, it will be either upon the individual organizations in the committee to support their staff members, or another entity can take up a bulk of that amount. Is that the position, Dr. Otoma?
Correct, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. So
a long time ago, for example, we used to organize meetings to International Atomic Energy Agency, and since we were thin on budgets, we would have a team of even up to 20. Like for example, last year, but it was not organized by NACOST, we had a team of not less than 24 Kenyans representing different institutions which came to the annual general conference of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now from NACOST, I was the only one, and again I was sponsored by NACOST. But the other people were sponsored by the individual institutions. Thank you, Chair.
Chair.
Thank you. Yes. Is that Engineer Walga?
Yes, Engineer Haga, but I just wanted to say that we all know that we undergo a budget making process, and anything that is not included in that budget, anything that is not included in the procurement plan, which is governed by the approved budget and is not in the work plan, can never be implemented. And therefore, for me, I would have hoped that this information would have come to us earlier, because as for nuclear, our budget was approved by the board yesterday, and there was nothing to that effect in this matter. But I appreciate that could be a risk in the implementation of the work that we are going to do, in the manner that if some other institutions are not able then to sponsor their participants, then what happens? But I also appreciate that it would be better that the institutions that are involved here also chips in terms of facilitations in whichever way they can. But it's only that the information is coming late after some of us have submitted the budget. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Engineer Ohaga. Yeah, let's see how things go. And also now with the world the way it is, maybe travel is not would become a bit of a problem in this time. But let's see how things go. I think we still have a bit of time also to decide on the issues of visitations and where to go, and these are local, international. So we'll find a way around that. Is there any other comment, or Dr. Otomo, you'll allow me to call the meeting, to conclude the meeting?
Yeah, Chair, if there is no other comment, I can stop recording when you adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And once again, Dr. Omola and your team, thank you for doing a splendid job. It's good to see that kind of expertise and skill in Kenya. So we commend you, and we're happy to have you on the committee. We look forward to now on the next meeting where we shall receive a final report, or at least near final, and also hearing from Kirdi as to what kind of approach shall we consider for stakeholder consultations. With that, I now adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.